I mean, speaking as a federal civil servant from Canada, the introduction that Mr. Doucette just gave about bureaucratic nightmares and climate change policy being poor at the federal level was perhaps not the best segue into my presentation. Just as an introduction, the Natural Resources Canada is a federal department that looks at energy along with mining and forestry, and we have the Geological Survey of Canada, so just so you know where we're situated. Natural Resources Canada has been an active participant in these cross-border forums, and I thank the folks for allowing me to speak at the last minute. I was added to the agenda, and just to give a bit of a federal perspective, we do like to help out here. What I'm going to talk about is, sorry, is there a, do I have something to forward this with? No, I can do it. What I'm going to talk about to start with is why North American energy trade matters. Bringing in the economics, energy security aspects, what's happening in the Canadian energy sector going forward, so that would be implications for environment and trade, and then what the Government of Canada is doing about it in terms of policies. So I know there are a lot of numbers on here, but I just wanted to tell you that not only does energy drive the economy in Canada, it's a huge part of our trade and a huge part of our economy. So any policies that affect the energy sector have a great effect on our GDP and in terms of energy investments, etc. So mainly I just wanted to make the message that this is a big segment of our economy. I know you've seen this before, but the main thing I wanted to tell you about this is that Alberta isn't the only place where we have energy. I mean, Saskatchewan is where we have uranium. Offshore in the East Coast, we have oil and gas. We have hydro in many provinces across Canada. There are a lot of places where the energy sector is really important, and it varies across coal reserves in British Columbia and Alberta. You know, we have energy and we have a lot of it, so we're quite blessed. So this is I just wanted to show you the scale of the kind of energy trade we have in North America. I mean, basically it's two markets, Canada, U.S., and U.S. and Mexico, and we're both heavily supplying the United States. I think you've heard this before in terms of Canada and Mexico being your number 1 and 2 crude oil suppliers, but this is big trade. I mean, for Canada, you know, energy exports are sort of 80% of our trade surplus. So this is a big deal for us in terms of the energy sector, and I think the United States sometimes needs to be reminded a little bit of where the energy is coming from. I know California is a bit different in terms of your profile versus other areas of the United States. But I won't get into Mexico too much, but you should know that production from their Canderel field, their big field, is declining something like 15% last year. So their actual oil output is going to be decreasing. Yes. So just reiterating again in terms of where the oil comes from and where the gas comes from, these are a bit old, the numbers, but in terms of the scale and the general kind of outline, the numbers in the countries are still about the same. For oil, Canada, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, big suppliers, the United States. Natural gas, well, LNG is still coming on stream, and so most of your gas still comes from Canada. Again, the numbers, and Pierre Alvarez may speak a little bit differently on the numbers. It's not as much the total numbers I want you to look at here. It's more the trend. And the trend is conventional down, non-conventional up. We do have some East Coast oil, of Hibernia, I'm sure you've heard of, and potentially Hebron, some big fields out there. But this is the trend. I mean, it is the oil sands that's going to be supplying the bigger part of our oil supply in Canada. Gas, again, conventional down, non-conventional is going to fill the gap. The one point that isn't shown on here is that Canada's domestic demand in gas is also going to grow over time. So the proportion that will be available for export will probably decrease over time, and quite significantly. So our share of the U.S. market is going to change quite a bit over time in terms of the absolute demand. The other point I'd make on here is the Mackenzie gas project, as Joe Doucette mentioned before. This shows a little bit earlier coming on stream than would be the case now. Probably 2011 might be the timeline that you'd be looking at. So what does that mean for Canada? Energy is a big part of our economy, but it's a big part of our greenhouse gas emissions and our pollution. And I think one of the things that we lose sight of in the conversation sometimes is the focus on climate change. And perhaps it's the other air issues that are now not getting as much attention. But obviously the NOx and SOx emissions from other sources in terms of smog, acid rain, these are still significant issues that arise from energy use and production. So I think that's a good sort of introduction into the way that the Government of Canada is looking at environment issues. So the focus is on air pollution and greenhouse gases. So it's a combined approach in terms of reducing emissions for both sources. I think everybody's talked about it this morning already. Being smarter, being cleaner, also looking at conventional resources was mentioned earlier. I think Dan mentioned that he felt that there wasn't enough being addressed in terms of looking at the future of reducing emissions from fossil fuels, which will still remain a big part of our energy mix. So some of the things that the Government of Canada, I think similar to California, we're looking at regulation, we're looking at incentives, we're looking at technology, we're looking at increasing the share of renewables. It's a mix of measures that I think is including targets. I would note that the reduction targets for GHG that are noted at the bottom there are from a 2006 baseline. One thing I would like to mention in terms of energy efficiency that I'm not sure was mentioned earlier, I can't recall. One of the things certainly my minister feels quite strongly about is the issue of standby power. And I know it's called different things in different places, but some of the measures that will be put in place in terms of standby power, I think they've said something like 5% of electricity in the United States goes to standby power, leaking, whatever you call it, vampire power, or just, the equipment that you've got in your house that keeps running even when turned off. So what Canada's looking at is possibly by 2008 increasing our sort of regulations in this area to California standards. So we're already, you're already ahead here in California, but it's something that we're looking at quite strongly. The other thing that everybody's been talking about is technology. And the reason I showed you, one of the reasons I showed you the the production mix and the fact that fossil fuels are an important part of the Canadian economy is that a lot of the technology initiatives that the government is looking at involve clean coal technologies, carbon capture and storage, the areas that are dealing with fossil fuels, in addition to the biofuels and the renewable sector as well, obviously. But there's this is a big issue for Canada. Right now, the Canada-Alberta CCS task force is looking at reporting by the end of the year, and certainly my Minister of Natural Resources is looking very strongly at what the recommendations are going to come out of this. It's a task group that involves CEOs, academia, and others, and are looking, the focus on the bottom line there, large-scale, fully integrated projects. I mean, one of the problems that's being faced in moving ahead with this technology in terms of demonstrations is that it's very expensive to do. I think in the last number of months, 4 major projects around the world that were going to go ahead have been canceled. And this is a big issue. So I know that partnerships with other countries, partnerships with industry and government are going to be a big feature of moving forward with this technology simply because of the huge cost. So in terms of international collaboration, something called the Carbon Sequestration Leadership Forum is going to be meeting in Calgary in a couple of weeks. And this is a group that's bringing together a lot of countries to look at CCS. Again, still a lot of recommendations that are going to come out of these groups, and it's going to be the key, is going to be implementation and projects. I mentioned clean coal under our eco-technology initiative of the federal government, and we're pleased to be contributing to this new project that's going to be a demonstration project. It's the first one that they've funded under our technology initiative, which is a partnership with Alberta, with the utility in Edmonton and the Clean Power Coalition. This is going to look at potential for zero-emission technology. Next, please. I won't get into this too much. It's not my complete area of expertise these days. The Environment Canada in our jurisdiction deals a lot with the air issues aspect of it. But suffice to say that we're looking at regulation that is going to address air pollutant reduction targets. These are being consulted, as Joe Doucette mentioned. In Canada, we consult a lot. We have to consult with provinces, we consult with the public, we consult with First Nations, environmental groups. It's usually quite a long process in terms of instituting policies. But potentially you're looking at caps and targets for a variety of pollutants. That's about it, but I did want to come back to international collaboration, and we just had a meeting this week, in fact, with our Mexican-American colleagues, and some of the initiatives that we're looking at under a sort of North American partnership in energy are partly to bring Mexico up to certain standards that we have already on appliances that we already harmonized between Canada and the United States, but trying to bring Mexico back up to our kind of standards. So, we're working on harmonizing the standards that federal governments have a certain jurisdiction for, which is mainly appliances. So we're working closely with the United States and Mexico and trying to do that. We also my minister and Secretary Bodman of Department of Energy and Secretary Kessel of Mexico this summer signed an S&T treaty, which allows the movement of money and people while protecting intellectual property rights between governments. Because one of the problems that was faced in terms of when you're talking about moving forward in cooperative ways between academia and governments was that we couldn't sort of do joint projects with different governments' money in other countries. So this allows us to do more cooperation between the three governments. They can be bilaterally, Canada-U.S. or U.S. and Mexico, but it was quite a significant thing this summer that was signed that we felt, and I think it was only the second agreement that Secretary Bodman had signed since he was appointed at the head of the Energy Ministry. So I do think that collaboration and working, in Canada we always have to work with provinces and we have to work together in terms of jurisdictions, but also working internationally. And certainly the Government of Canada, in terms of some of these technologies, is going to be working closely with the United States and moving forward because of the huge costs of moving ahead with some of these, like I said, carbon capture and storage being a big one. So look forward to some of the dialogue this afternoon, and I know it's always difficult to reconcile these, the economy, environment, and moving ahead, but this gives you a bit of an idea what we're moving on in Canada. Thanks.